Good afternoon. So the ecosystem of ITADs, that is the companies that are in the business of handling IT assets when they reach the end of their primary life cycle, is pretty dense. Of the hundreds of companies active in the market, perhaps even thousands, not all of them are good, in particular the ones whose market reach is limited to local or regional clients. But a few of them are excellent companies that do the exact things that need to be done and more. I remember in one of my briefings with an investment firm, the principal, that is my clients, told me, and I'm quoting, "Don't talk to me about the product or the market yet. Instead, tell me more about the people that manage the company." End of quote. And so today I'm pleased to speak to Fulton Connor, CEO and president of Tempus, an ITAD company that operates from Newbury Park in California, from Denver, Colorado, Dallas, Texas, and Frederick, Maryland. I could tell you, for example, that Tempus clients include some of the very well-known brands like Boeing, Disney, and the FAA, for example. But instead, let us hear from Fulton directly, and let's find out more about him as the founder of the company and what the company does. So, welcome to our podcast, Fulton. Tell us, if you could, more about you and what led you to be in the ITAD business.
Well, David, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. This business started out for us about 7 years ago as nothing more than just an investment with my partners and I. And it was funny, what we found was this little company was kind of struggling along, and we decided to buy the company and see what we could do with it. And it's really morphed for us. This is no longer just a buy, build, sell. This is greener earth, being part of the world's narrative on how we can improve the health of this planet and be a part of that narrative and maybe make some money along the way. So it's really turned out to be a terrific investment benefit for us.
And how has the journey been so far for you guys? Excitement? I do recall 2023 was a relatively difficult year for the sector in general. How did you guys fare, and how are you looking at 2024 in general?
Well, COVID was wonderful for all of us.
Yes.
And much as you pointed out, we had to give up a little here in 2023. But, we've been working with companies long enough. I mean, you have good times, you have tough times, and, the overall experience has really been great. And 2023 is not something that I'd like to continue. And we've kind of, there was some lessons learned. Especially in the pricing of remarketing materials and how the market changed, and that's okay. We've made adjustments. We're still doing what we need to do in 2024 is we're back on track.
Yes, yeah. So I do define you as a local/regional player, but you're relatively spread. Do you still consider yourself a regional player? It's easy to say Company XYZ is a national company by virtue of having locations in different places. But isn't ITAD at the end a local story?
It is. We've looked at a lot of these larger companies and how they've tried to expand their global footprints, and we're not completely convinced that's the right direction to go. We have found to be, if we focus regionally, we're much stronger. We're better at what we do. And it gets a bit complicated when you are expanding too much and you start having these discussions about reducing your carbon footprint and what it means, and should we really just be focused on the local markets and doing a better job locally. I mean, our home office is in Southern California. Los Angeles County alone is over 10 million people. I mean, it's a pretty big market within itself, and that seems to be our primary focal point. We do have other locations to allow for pickup, drop off, if you will. And so we're not transporting items back and forth across the U.S., which is important. to reduce that footprint, but our primary focus is, regionally, especially here in Southern California.
Yeah, and honestly, so this is a position of mine that has been shifting over time and shifting rapidly recently for a number of reasons. We've been doing a lot of work on the marketing side, and we did discover that having a local identity or a regional identity is from the standpoint of reaching out to customers, it plays a better role in general to create a comfort zone between sort of you guys and the client. Granted, of course, if you have very large enterprise clients, that could be a national story, that could be a continental story, it could be an international story, but a substantial chunk of the customer base in the commercial space are local public sector, regional public sector entities, school districts, etc. And I think folks like you that have sort of a better visibility at the local and regional level tend to do better because of the relationships that they ended up creating as as a local player.
Well, I would agree with that, and we've even found that, for example, the local municipalities find a certain city pride, if you will, with us being within their marketplace, and that's something that they're very proud to have. That we're here, and we're one of the few people in this area that do what we do. If you were to go up the 101 corridor, for example, between here and the Bay Area, we're the only player. And especially this far north of Los Angeles. And so when you look at, you're right, the schools and the city municipalities, it becomes very important. The other thing with these national enterprise customers that we have, a lot of them are based in this area. And we've found a few of them were gathering their products and shipping them to the Midwest for processing, for example. And we've shown them that it would be better to keep it locally. Again, we're talking about reducing your carbon footprint and getting this material handled properly. It's funny how it all just starts to kind of tie in together. Yes.
I can tell you that this is the message that I also shared with a client of mine that produces multi-function peripheral. I just think of those gigantic printers that they load those used devices, big devices, in gigantic trucks.
Right.
Ship them all the way down to central Mexico, a place like Aguascalientes. Fix them and do whatever, and then return them back to the U.S. or find other markets in Latin America. So, I think you're going to see more of that being revisited by these big companies as they try to reduce their carbon footprint. It starts with transportation. Very simple argument, but not an easy one. Of course, it takes a transition period, a lot of thinking process, resources to bring back. But that's an opportunity for ITAD companies that want to be in a market like this.
Well, I agree with you, because 3 years ago, we weren't even talking about that. This was not part of the discussion, transportation and the carbon footprint and what we were doing. And so it is a very recent piece of a discussion, but it's an important one.
Specific to your customers, from your 4 locations, you certainly reach a good number of clients. Can you share with us what are their pain points, or at least what's perhaps from your perspective, what are the pain points facing their industry as you engage clients? What are you seeing there that sort of make you concerned or worried?
Well, there's still the issue of downstream. What's really going on? Is it documented? In the past, people would, ask the question, are you being good about your downstream? Well, and everybody shrugged their shoulders and say yes. But now it's trust but verify. Can you show me what you're doing with your downstream? Where is it really going? What does it really mean? And so we've had to get much, much better about that in documenting it. And you're going to hear me refer a lot to carbon footprint because it's an important part of our conversation now in everything that we do. What does that mean to the customer? How do we translate it back to them? The other change that we're seeing, interestingly enough, you've got your IT department, your IT managers, your CIOs, that all kind of deal with this asset side of the business. But now they have a new department in there that are the people that work with ESG compliance.
Yes.
And the two aren't really communicating with each other still. And we're kind of having to bridge that conversation for them a little bit to really understand what that means with them as an organization. Now, and that's going to change rather quickly, but because it's such a new area that it's more meaningful in discussion, we're finding ourselves to kind of have to bridge that topic within their organizations, which is interesting.
Yeah, and it's always been a hard sell, so to speak. It's very difficult to make that narrative, to find the right people. I've been covering this space since 2003, Fulton, and there were moments very similar to this one where there was a lot of excitement. So I remember back in the old days, it was about green IT. Back in mid 2000, it was about green IT, and we identified the same issues that ESG is focusing on today. But guess what? That didn't last.
Right.
That didn't last because, the 2008 financial crisis resulted in forcing people to focus on continuity and business continuity, and
right.
and in many cases survival, and it was an existential issue, and so we're sort of back. The question is specifically, is who is responsible for ITAD? Who is responsible for bringing ITAD into the realm of ESG? So far, what we found is 75% of U.S. corporations rely on IT departments to handle their end of life. Naturally, because obviously they're the ones that touch, IT departments are the ones that touch the device. But we found that they're extremely poorly equipped
right.
to deal with the complexity of ITAD. It's an environmental issue, it's a data security issue, it's a financial consideration issue, it's an operational issue. I mean, it's all over the map, and yet you're asking a guy who may be a help desk analyst
right.
to take care of all of that. Is that your sense that what?
Well, you've hit it on the head, because it's no longer just an ROI issue. ROI is still important, and they understand that to a certain degree. But you've just now, with all those topics you brought up, have mentioned the complexities within their own organization. And a lot of these organizations really don't understand how complicated it's gotten. And now we're having to work with multiple departments. And you're right, the help desk guy who's just trying to clean out the closet, if you will, and get this stuff placed and show that he can get him a check. Those days are starting to be behind us a little bit, because there's more involvement within that organization. And what does it mean? Which means our reporting is now have to really step up to the next level, to show that they're in compliance and to show the benefits of them, not just only financially, but environmentally, what they're doing.
Yeah,
really translate that into usable numbers for them.
Since you talked about industry readiness, let's talk about the ITAD industry readiness, if you don't mind. Some time ago, Gartner predicted that 2022, that is 2 years ago, we would have a global installed base of devices that would encompass PCs, tablets, and smartphones of 6.4 billion. So this is let's say this is sort of the numbers that we see in 2024, 6.4 billion. We saw that the shipments of PCs and smartphones over the past couple of years struggled to sustain the type of growth rates that the PC industry wants, but a recovery clearly is likely, as the industry, is injecting AI as a key driver. Still, we're looking at an installed base of devices nearing probably 7 billion units by now. Is the ITAD industry prepared to the challenge? This is a huge installed base, and do you think, Fulton, that the ITAD industry is up to the task?
In my opinion, David, part of the issue for us is we're always dealing with technology 3 years old, or older. And so, honestly, we're actually running behind a little bit.
Okay.
And as we talk about going into AI and what that means to the next generation as far as chips and where we're going, we don't deal with that material because we're still dealing on a little older technology here. And for me, it's going to be interesting. Desktops are starting to go by the wayside right now.
Yes.
We're watching laptops get smaller, and what does that mean? And then there's this issue of, I believe Microsoft is going to discontinue one of their operating system. Is it Windows 10?
Yep.
Here within the next couple years. And with the new technology, none of those machines are going to be able to handle that. So we're kind of running behind everybody else and trying to figure out how to do this. And so we're not ahead of what's going on with the technology here because we don't touch that on a daily basis. The other issues that we're dealing with right now is things get smaller. What does that mean for us? So we still rely on a lot of manual dismantling on a lot of these products. And so a lot of this stuff can't be. When you look at something as small as like an ear pod, I mean, it has a battery in it. What do we do with it? We still struggle with that kind of stuff, but we didn't get a lead-in of saying, hey, this is the new stuff coming on the market. How are you going to handle this going forward? We don't know because it hasn't been showing up in our Gaylords, if you will.
Yeah. And that's why I've been very, I've been sort of a proponent of better discussion channels between the ITAD industry and the OEMs.
Right.
I think it's important that both parts of the business, the upstream and downstream, have relationships that are conducive to making improvements when it comes to the end of life. But not only that, but also sort of giving a heads up to the industry of what they should expect going forward and have them be participants. The industry is not ready yet. It's comprised of a lot of small companies that may not have necessarily the capability to pressure the likes of Dell and HP and Lenovo, etc.
Right.
But eventually it will come down to that as well. But let me sort of rephrase the question in a different way.
Okay.
How scalable is Tempus? In other words, if you really have now a X times more to treat and deal with in terms of assets, do you have that? You look at on one side 6.5, 7 billion devices, and you look at sort of collectively the ITAD industry. Let's take it down to the level that we know. Is Tempus capable of scaling if demand requires it?
Well, for me, the answer is yes. You'd asked me how things have been going for us the past couple of years when we kind of started this conversation, and some of our focus around here has been process, and what it means to get a variety of devices in here and allow us functionally to keep moving forward as a business. I mean, we're always hampered by real estate. I can only stick so much in a warehouse, if you will.
Particularly in California.
Yeah, well, and so, each square foot of that warehouse becomes of high value, which means in on Monday, out by Tuesday type thing. And we have been continuing to work on the efficiencies of these of our processes in dealing with a multitude of electronic components, because as you can imagine, I don't just get one of the same item. I get a variety of items, and each one requires to be handled a little differently. And so our staff is highly trained. I mean, we've spent a lot of time as a company making sure, whether it's wages and benefits and what have you, to keep these people here, and then continuous training programs so we can start handling the variety and the multitude of devices coming in the door. Am I going to handle all 64 billion pounds of it? Well, no, but we're going to be able to take on a big chunk as it increases coming through the door. And I think that's a lot of what companies deal with. They'd like to get the same device, the same type of device all the time to keep things running smoothly, and that's just not realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the type of devices and products and form factors that you manage on your site, on your end, we're probably talking about all sort of the PC spectrum, desktop, laptops,
Yes.
tablets. Are we talking about smartphones and data centers as well?
Yes, we are. We're talking about all of it. And then you still even throw in the stuff. Come on, there's still printers and keyboards and mice and all that other stuff that goes in with that too, that we have to handle responsibly.
The accessories. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. It's all part of it. And I think that's part of the problem in this industry. There's only a certain amount of that represents value to us, if you will, but we still have to responsibly handle all of it. It has to find the proper resting place, if you will.
And do you extend that to non-computing products or products that are coming from, let's say, hospitals, medical equipment?
Absolutely.
Oh.
All electronics. And it's funny, we as a business do not turn anything away, because I would rather bring it in here and figure out how to handle it properly than have somebody throw it in the trash because they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, that's a great message. Absolutely a great message. So I'm assuming your primary interest is elongating the life of those devices.
Absolutely.
And what's your channel strategy as you look into selling those devices into the secondary market after they're refurbished, certified maybe, etc.?
It's funny, we have, first of all, we work worldwide. And what we've learned is certain markets like certain products. South America loves Chromebooks for whatever reason. We've got a great channel there. The Middle East is starting to turn into a great secondary market for us too. And then there's a lot of stuff that we just, we've got to figure out what to do locally. A lot of the one-off items we will clean up and secure the data on it, and it may go on eBay and keep it local.
Yeah.
So, it just kind of depends on whether or not it's a one-off or high volume will determine on which channel it actually goes into.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you manage sort of the stuff that can't be really resold? I'm assuming it's the same process in terms of looking at recyclers to take the products?
Well, so the stuff that can't be resold?
Yes.
The stuff that we can't. So, the first thing we do, David, is we look at it from a dismantling standpoint of view. Can we recover the core materials out of it? We have the ITAD business, but we're still a recycler too. So we still seek the gold, aluminum, plastic, steel, copper. We're still looking for those base materials that we can separate and sell. If an item is too small for us to do that or really doesn't represent a lot of value, then we send that off to a shredder who shreds the material and then separates it from the shredded material, if you will. Mm-hmm. So we still seek a downstream way to handle it properly to make sure it in its rawest form gets back into the streams.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do offer sort of the full suites of services. First priority is creating a secondary market opportunity.
Correct.
Second is dismantling the products, reusing the parts. Third is basically shredding and placing those products back into the commodity markets. If that makes sense.
And we're still exploring other ways. Hard drives, for example. They've got those magnets in there are of value, and we've still been trying to figure out a way how to. The moment you send a hard drive through a shredder, you kind of lose the value of the metals and the magnets. Can we dismantle this stuff? Can we pull the neodymium magnet out of there? What can we do with that? Can we, get more value out of each item? And so we spend a lot of time on these topics, seeing what else we can do as a recycler.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've without any doubt heard the story of Morgan Stanley's data breach case. What do you guys do on that front? Obviously, if you're getting all those devices from Boeing, there must be some pretty strange rules in your services agreement.
Well, data security is number one for us. And we are a high security facility. It's complete lockdown. People can't come and go. When that stuff comes in, the first thing we have to do is make sure it's handled properly. And if it's, we get those drives out, we make sure that they're wiped. If they can't be wiped, they're destroyed. Number one, before we do anything as far as remarketing or anything else is concerned, data security. Because it doesn't matter if I do 1,000 right, if I do one wrong, guess what?
Yeah, that's it.
That's what everybody remembers. That's what you're known for. And I'm not going to be known for that. We're going to be known for the 1,000 that are right, period.
To what extent your customers are, more interested in the data security as a service from your perspective, as opposed to, well, it's something that you're offering so that you can get the device and then place the device into the market. That's your revenue source. To what extent data security is or can be a source of revenue for the ITAD industry? There's a lot of complicated dynamics involved here, Fulton. You have a number of data erasure companies that specialize in that are suppliers to both your company and your companies and the companies that you're trying to serve. It's a very dynamic market, and to your point, is an extremely important market. I would argue perhaps even more than the environmental story. It's a huge topic, but could that be a source of sustainable revenue for the industry as a service?
Well, I believe it is. I mean, you had mentioned Morgan Stanley, and everybody in my industry knows that story.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the larger financial institutions know that story. So it put everybody on notice. It's easy for me to reference that in a conversation when somebody's eyes get big and we need to make sure that we're secure. And this is another one of those things, David. 5 years ago, people really weren't ready to pay money to have their hard drives destroyed or have them handled properly. They would just say, wink, wink, please handle it properly and move on. They now understand the value of making sure that it's handled properly and working with the right company. And we are now, this industry has become a trust but verify. They want to see it. I need you to send me a report showing that, these hard drives, serial numbers have been destroyed. Give me a report.
Are they willing to pay for that, Fulton?
They are now. They are understanding the value in it. Because the last thing we want to do in this quick news channel world that we live in, want to have somebody report otherwise. Nobody wants to lose their job over that. So
yeah. Is this a vertical market play? In other words, there's the maturity over this issue of data security that you have to pay for it. Concerns largely companies that are hugely impacted by regulations, the financial sector, the healthcare sector, a lot less the guys that are below that line, if you will, companies that are, well, let's say in retail, for instance, which many of them have been really hit hard by Californian regulation for sure,
right,
but not so much outside of California because they think they can get away with it. But is that a vertical play?
Well, it's funny you mention that. I think I have the benefit of the harshness in the state of California. I don't know how to put it any other way. We're all on high alert in this state. And so we apply those standards across the board. But if I'm going to be held to a higher standard, I'm not going to let my guard down if I go to another location. Yeah. We're going to keep doing it. And we emphasize the value of it. Do other parts of the country share that similar sense of urgency? No, they don't. But they're getting there. And, the good news is there are stories out there that you need to emphasize that. So I think it gives us an edge in discussion because we already do it. And our expectation is that you should be, concerned about it.
Yeah.
We're happy to explain it to them. So they're getting there. They're definitely there here. But the rest of the country, specific to doing business in California, I can tell you that
Frank Sinatra used to say, if you can make it here, you can make it everywhere. I think he probably, vis-a-vis you, he's probably thinking about California.
I think you're right. Absolutely.
Let's shift a little bit to some of the big macro factors that are impacting, everything and everyone. AI, for example, is obviously in everyone's minds. I'm personally stunned by the capabilities of AI to do a lot of things quickly. A lot of good things quickly. Some of it is not that great, but the writing's on the wall. What's your sense as to what AI's role first among your customers, and then the role of AI within your company as an ITAD service provider?
My perception for my customers means that they're going to be spending a lot of money to upgrade their equipment, which is going to mean a lot more turns for them in their IT departments. For us, still, at the end of the day, we're still kind of this meat and potatoes, I don't want to say low level, but very hands-on process to get it done. And I haven't seen big changes at this stage. But remember, we're still kind of running behind a little bit, dealing with older technology, how we're handling it. I would love to find a more efficient way in our processing.
Yeah,
I just haven't seen it.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think this is very much in its infancy, Fulton. Only now, I think that the very first AI-powered PC has emerged from Microsoft. I think they call it Copilot PC/PC or dash PC,
right,
something like that. But my stance on it, for what it's worth, is really sort of ensuring that the ITAD companies are ready for what's to come, because it will come. I think from an end user perspective, you are going to see these programs, these AI engines that are going to drive changes in their own IT and database infrastructure.
Right.
So everything that they're used to in terms of reporting, and it's sort of very similar to what you see on the ESG impact. Mm-hmm. It's going to open up a lot of things that these people are will discover over time. On the ITAD front, I mean, just imagine changes that are going to appear in the areas of price forecasting. Second, right. That's only that. I mean, but think about all the changes that are going to happen within your organization in terms of affecting how you deal with those devices and how quickly things can be done. And then obviously there is this third leg, which in my opinion is very important, which is sort of how do you how do you mix your IT capability, your AI capabilities with that of your clients, and that creating really tight relationships between the two of you, and hence becoming much more important for them. But I think that's going to be very, very important for sure.
It's funny, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was having a big run on video cards. Well, come to find out, I was having such a run because that was the crypto craze kind of hit at that point. And it was a big deal. And after I understood what was going on, obviously, we did what we could to supply that secondary market with those video cards as they pursued the processing. I haven't felt that run yet in relation to AI and what that means for the business. And I'm kind of sitting back in fascination because it is going to impact us. I just don't know how.
Yeah. I mean, there is obviously the obvious, which is right, the devices that you're going to be dealing with, I would say maybe less than 3 years, because there is going to be new revisions and new updates of AI that will force a faster refresh cycle on the PC and on the device side.
Right.
The AI story is still in its infancy, and so whatever AI products coming a year from now will be probably vastly different, much more performing, which means that this year's AI is going to be probably insignificant.
Right.
So I think this is another area where you guys will have to deal with sooner than 3 years. I think it's going to be faster than that, and you're going to be dealing with a refresh cycle that's going to be a little faster, perhaps a lot faster than what you'd be accustomed to. Because of that, to me, that's sort of the obvious thing, right? Above and beyond your data infrastructure, which is going to be affected no matter what. If it's not you, it will be your competitor, and etc. And so that readiness has to be there, and perhaps it's a comment in general to make in terms of what I think is likely to happen for sure.
I agree with you. Yeah.
So compliance standards. We are launching something called the ITAD Academy in July, and it would be great if you could confirm a few things that we are promoting as our educational effort, starting with what do you advise organizations really need to do or to consider when exploring new ITAD services for their business. It's a company that hasn't really paid attention to, and all of a sudden, the sense of urgency is here and they need to launch a program, or they've been doing it but not doing it the right way. Where do you start?
Well, it's funny. I still hear stories out there, David, of downstream non-compliance, if you will.
Okay.
Companies that take in material that's supposed to destroy them, but somehow they magically end up, going to places they're not supposed to go to. Material that's really not being properly handled and sent. Again, places, the downstream's not being verified. And I'm surprised by it, because I've heard it yet again this week of another company that was surprised where their materials ended up. And we won them as a customer because of that. So that's still, I'm surprised actually, that's still a big topic of discussion, is the downstream.
It is, absolutely it is. It's, obviously you have a couple of certifications that try to address that problem.
Right.
But this is industry self-regulation, or self-regulating itself. It's regulating itself. And so there's probably some ways those products end up going to different places and nobody knows where they are. I mean, I can tell you that we engage with a number of Chinese companies that are prospecting here in the U.S. to find, sourcing for whatever they're doing in China.
Right.
So there is a global demand for it. And how do you guys deal with that? I mean, I'm assuming you're certified?
We are certified, and we do believe in the third-party certification. But that third-party certification is only as good as you maintain their standards.
Yeah.
You can get the certification, and then you can go do whatever you want until the next round of them, recertifying you. And so I encourage companies to really, this is my whole trust but verify. Okay, they tell you that they're doing it and they're certified, but ask to see the paperwork. Ask to see where it's going. Where is the final resting place? Where's it being shipped to? I mean, there's so much documentation and paperwork that's required in this industry, from bills of lading, to, we actually use it to measure carbon footprint reduction. And so it's not difficult, but you have to ask the question.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I am definitely, a proponent of transparency. I mean, the more transparency, the better. You create strong ties with your customers.
Right.
Things look good. How do you engage with customers and other stakeholders? Do you allow them to audit you, for example?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Do we do what?
Do you allow them to audit you, to do an audit and visit your sites?
We actually provide them with a portal. So they can actually log into their account and see exactly where everything is going with the supporting documentation. And we do have a couple customers that come in and audit us, and we welcome that. I actually encourage it, simply because then I want them to tell their buddies what they found out here. I think it's just good, solid business practices. And, we have nothing to hide here. Look, David, just because you can make more money going somewhere else doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And we've had to cross that a couple of times in this business, and we've chosen to take the high road versus some short-term increase in profits, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's where the future of the industry lies.
It has to.
Yeah, I think the companies that are focusing on commoditization, and I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time pronouncing that word, but turn that word into a commodity business,
right?
Are gonna be facing problems going forward as their clients will focus more on values that they're willing to pay as services, particularly around transparency, around sustainability, around circularity, around green, around data security.
Right.
I think the guy that is excited to receive a check from the ITAD and turn it to their boss and say, "Hey, boss, I got $100,000 check." I think that guy is going to be surprised to learn that in a longer run, that's not going to happen. That's not going to be the value, and the boss may not worry about that because the priority would be data security, environment, sustainability, etc.
And you mentioned the state of California. I mean, the state of California is now coming in and holding these companies to a higher standard. Mm-hmm. And they're asking, prove it. Show us what's going on in your ESG world. And we have to help them be able to prove that and show that it's being handled properly. And so, much to your point, it's no longer just about ROI.
No.
It's still important, but that's not it. And we have to show, how these multiple departments, whether it's their compliance officer is now working with their IT department, with ESG. I mean, we have to be able to weave all that together for them. And
and I think ROI will be replaced by TCO, with your total cost of ownership, which would dramatically escalate at a tune of $160 million for Morgan Stanley.
Right.
If you're doing the wrong thing. So I think a TCO discussion is probably a lot more valuable than an ROI discussion. Right. The ROI is legal protection from legal jeopardy.
Yeah, and it's funny, you ask if people are willing to pay for our services. I think they're finding we're actually an inexpensive alternative to what you've just described.
Yes, absolutely, and that's that's for the mid to long run. That's the right position. Of course, right. In the meanwhile, you still have to pay the bills, and yes, you need to sort of go through a normal business continuity with what really generates revenues. But I think longer term, mid to long term, I think the cost of not doing the right thing could escalate drastically, and that should be the story.
Well, and I think like anything else, you end up just baking it into your business model. I mean, it's the cost of doing business in this world. Much like fuel for your truck or insurance for your business or what have you. Guess what? Exactly. It's another layer. It's just that's the way it is, and that's that's the way it should be.
Absolutely.
We've been such a disposable society for so long, and I'm going to kick some of this back on the manufacturers. At one point, for example, on printers, I mean, it was just cheaper to replace your printer every time you needed new cartridges because you got cartridges in the new one type thing. And there was not a lot of thought given to the downstream on this material. And now everybody has to pause and think about it. What does this mean?
Yes. And some of the some of the ideas that they had is sort of the, printer as a service or a PC as a service. I'm hearing nowadays a used equipment as a service. Believe it or not, that's happening in Europe. There is demand for that. There is a law in France which could trickle into the rest of Europe, where public sector entities are required to buy up to 20% of their IT infrastructure to replace that with used equipment.
Wow.
And so there is a sense that this is going to migrate into the rest of Europe, and you can see how interesting leasing used equipment could be for sustainability in the long run. So admittedly, Fulton, up until recently, I was not so excited about certifications. I saw some of the political battles between e-stewards and R2, being pretty intense. And I changed my tune recently, to be honest with you, because I do recognize that we need, common sets of practices,
Right.
that are important. I did see how many of my clients and many ITAD companies tend to sort of complain that they feel that it's important to have both certifications, for instance, because, well, not having both of them would take a hit on their competitiveness.
Right.
But I'd say, well, that's, like you said, that's the cost of doing business. What's your take on certifications? My sense is end user clients are not necessarily excited about them because they don't know.
Well, they don't understand what they really need.
They don't understand it. And full disclosure, back in early in mid 2000, I started one.
Okay.
As a not similar model as the one that exists today, but one that says, well, it's certified by XYZ name, because we set a number of metrics and we visited all these companies and they're doing it and they meet 80%, etc., etc. A major bank actually required its ITAD companies to be certified by the program that I put together. And when I met them, I asked them, do you actually know what's in the system? And they admitted, no, we don't have a clue. And I said, but why are you forcing your suppliers to do it? Well, they said it's a vetting process. We trust you as a researcher, an independent researcher, that you've actually done the legwork. You've vetted these companies and you come up with your own assessment. We don't have time to read. I'm a procurement manager. I'm an IT guy. I know you did it, and off we go. To me, hopefully, R2E stewards are much more than that. Of course,
right.
They're much more important than that. But what's your sense on how your customers are sort of understand those certifications? Granted, you guys need to have them, but what's your client's position?
It's funny you ask that. We've been R2 since the day I bought the company, and for the first 3 years, I didn't see value in it. I just didn't. I didn't understand it. It seemed to be an expensive, distracting process to get recertified every year. And like you, my tune has changed a lot on it. I see a lot of value in it because I have this third-party company holding me accountable for what we're doing. And I think that's important in our industry. I can tell you that we do not maintain both standards. We're only R2. We chose not to take on e-stewards just simply because when I look at the two, I don't see a lot of difference between them. If our customers are going to require both, then that's something that we're going to have to sit down and take a look at in the future. But we've chosen R2 at this point. And I like, now with we talked about transparency. R2 allows me to be very transparent with my customers. You don't have to trust me just because I'm R2, but because I'm R2, here's the stuff that you should be looking for within my organization. And I welcome you to take a look at it. But I don't want to discount e-stewards also. I think as an ITAD company, you should belong to one or the other. If you choose both, then you choose both.
All right.
But I think there's a certain amount of safety and comfort it offers our customers more, and they're starting to realize that. A lot of them don't want to take the time to look at our downstream, so they'll say, fine, you're R2, somebody must have, or e-steward, somebody must have, and that's fine too. But the expectations now are out there that there's some type of certified body that comes attached to the ITAD organization.
And regulation helps
Right.
sort of advance what these certifications are sort of promoting?
Regulation helps a lot. I mean, look, I think everybody hears about the hordes of waste, electronics going into the landfills, whatever. And so we're all trying to feel like something's being done a little differently, a little better. And so people in general, I think, find comfort in knowing something is regulated or watched or monitored. And, if that establishes a deeper comfort level, then good, let's do it. I encourage it. I like the other thing for me, David, as an R2 company, I'm more comfortable dealing with other R2 companies.
Absolutely, you have common guidelines.
Absolutely,
for sure. Yeah. Let's take the last 10 minutes to get to know a little more about your company, Fulton.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit more about sort of the resources that you have as a company. You talked about the ability to scale up. That's great. What's the company's vision for the next, I don't know, let's say 5 years, for example?
Well, obviously, top line growth is always important. We're a for-profit organization, but we would like to get a better command of the market. We've got an initiative right now in Southern California to really become kind of the go-to brand, if you will, in the marketplace here. We want to be the authority. We want to be the trusted company. But we are focusing more locally. It's really become important to us. When you deal with these national companies, it kind of changes things a little bit, but the world's not made up of just national companies. We're doing a lot with municipalities, a lot with school districts. We want them to, and the funny thing is for me as a business owner, when they do business locally, you're feeding families locally too. I've got 50 employees here with 50 families, let's help support those 50 families within this location. So, that's kind of how we view the world.
Yeah, and growth expected to be organically or a mix? Most of the companies I speak with are looking for expansion capabilities, and they're looking to acquire assets. And where do you stand going forward?
So the answer is yes. We are looking at both organic, and we will do an acquisition if it makes sense. We've looked at a number of acquisitions. The problem is corporate culture is big for us. We've got a set of corporate values in place here that, if their values don't match our values, then we're not going to make that acquisition. And that's a big deal to us right now.
Of course.
Organic seems to be better to keep with those values, that corporate culture, if you will. And as we grow, that's probably the direction that we'll look.
Yes. So when you think of acquisition, you're not thinking of site and facility acquisitions. You're thinking of acquiring a brand as well, or a brand and a practice. Not something that you would sort of incorporate into your company, rebrand it Tempus, and grow from there in a different geography in the East Coast.
But David, I go back to values. I mean, if they don't share the same values as we do, then we're going to spend most of our time in there potentially breaking what we view as bad habits and in the wrong direction. Because there's many layers to this business. And there's a lot of companies out there that don't necessarily do what they say they're going to do. And to me, that's based on their value system.
Of course.
And man, we've really been focused on that in the past 2 years. And we look for organizations that share the same values.
Absolutely. Well, on that point, Fulton, it was a pleasure talking to you. And I think we should do more of these talks going forward.
I really appreciate your time and thank you. I enjoyed it today.